Representative Dennis Richardson with me now, running for governor. You, as a Republican, have the tall task of trying to relate to the very liberal metro Portland area. How do you do that?
I do it by getting the word out. One way I've been doing it for years is I have a newsletter that goes out to 420,000 Oregonians all across the state. And I've dealt with issues that are statewide significance, and it's built a credibility and a trust that I'm working on and adding to through the media, through appearances, through shows like this one. And the goal is for people to understand that I'm a rational attorney who I had a practice for 30 years. I was an ex-helicopter pilot. I flew combat missions in Vietnam. I've raised 9 kids. They all graduated from public schools. I've been a legislator for 11 years. I was unanimously elected by the Democrats and the Republicans in the House to be the Speaker Pro Tem, and I was co-chair of Ways and Means, and we crafted the budget in a very difficult cycle in 2011. All of these things add to the fact that I'm here to focus on rebooting our economy and creating jobs, on reforming education. I mean, we're next to last in graduation rates. We're losing a generation of our kids, and we need to restore trust in the governor's office when there's these accusations of fraud, waste, and abuse, and maybe even criminal activity. We just can't continue with what we've had under this current governor.
People call Vic Atiyeh the last Republican governor from Oregon. Analysts say just by virtue of John Kitzhaber putting a D by his name, he wins by default. Do you have a realistic shot of overcoming that?
Absolutely. Oregon is like what Churchill said about America, that we do the right thing after we've tried everything else. We will vote for the right person to lead us into the future after we analyze what it's been like to have 3 terms of Governor Kitzhaber. Unemployment is higher than the national average, which means we don't have enough jobs, and it's been that way since 1996. We're talking about 18 years of high unemployment. I have 4 of my children that have been exported to other states to get a decent job. We shouldn't be losing our youth to other states. We should be exporting products and services to other states and other countries, because that creates demand for our products, that creates jobs for Oregon workers.
How do you do that?
You do it in a number of ways. One is that you look at your markets internationally. Our #1 trade partner is China. #2 is Japan. As a legislator, I've organized 10 trade missions to China. This is what the governor and the governor's office should be doing, but as a legislator, I've done that. I've been 11 times to China. I've been made an honorary citizen of our sister state in China, Fujian, because I go over there every year with a message that Oregon is open for business and that we have products and services that will be beneficial to Chinese consumers. And so in one instance, we've taken a company that had 15 employees, and because of the work that we did to help them get good contracts in China, and now it's in other countries around the world, they have over 60 employees. This is a small company down in Ashland. You create jobs by creating demand for products and services. We can do that internationally, and we can do it nationally. We can do it in all regions of our state. Our current governor doesn't represent the entire state. He represents his own little fiscal area, and we need a governor who will be watching out for all Oregonians.
The governor has somewhat of a reputation amongst the media as being aloof, hard to access. What kind of governor would you be?
I am going to be the governor of the people. My mentor is Vic Atiyeh. He had office hours. I will have office hours. I am available to the media because you have a job to do, and that's getting the word out to the people. A governor should be the representative of the people at the highest level in the state, not an aristocrat. Our current governor is only in Salem a 4th of his time, and according to the logs that were discovered by the Oregonian in one of their articles, they said when he's there 4 to 6 hours a day. He doesn't show up. He took 7 weeks of vacation in 10.5 months before this article came out. He was in Bhutan with Sylvia learning about gross national happiness while we were in session trying to figure out how to make Cover Oregon work. He is aloof, he's detached, he's a figurehead governor who has big ideas but short and small on the follow-through. That's why we've lost so much money on Cover Oregon and the CRC Bridge Project and other projects. It's a failure to lead.
Let's talk Cover Oregon. It's been one of the biggest debacles in the history of the state. But my sense is the voters of Oregon don't seem to connect the dots between Cover Oregon and John Kitzhaber. Why is that?
They just haven't heard the story. When I was co-chair of Ways and Means, I was one of those that helped craft the budget, and so I had direct connection with the governor a year before the Cover Oregon debacle, this failure that got us in national prominence as the worst website for healthcare in the country. I sent letters to the leaders of Cover Oregon and the Oregon Health Authority and the governor with a copy of a quality assurance report. We paid over $1 million for a team of experts to oversee the project, and they were blowing the whistle saying this is going to fail if we don't take action now. I got no response from the leaders of Cover Oregon or the Oregon Health Authority, no response from the governor, so I called him. He called me back and we talked about it, and I said, John, this is going to fail. Your quality assurance team is pointing this out. You've got to take action. He said, Dennis, you got to trust the team. I said, if it was your $48 million, by the way, it's $300 million now,
right,
but back then, at the beginning, it was $48 million. I said, and you were investing it, and you hired a quality assurance oversight group, and they were warning you, you're going to lose your investment. You wouldn't say, trust the team. You would take action. He said, I'll look into it. He didn't look into it. He trusted his team. He didn't do the oversight that was required, and as a result, it's another catastrophic failure and a waste of hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars.
A scandal like that would torpedo most candidates' races, campaigns. Why hasn't it torpedoed his?
Primarily because he has such name recognition, and I mean, people know him, and they haven't really tuned in, I think, to this campaign. It's starting to happen right now. From the very beginning, and realize I started my campaign 14 months ago, and from the beginning I've said, it's not about now, it's about when the ballots come out. And that's when there will be the focus by those in the middle that will help ensure the outcome of this election. They're the ones that tune in toward the end. They're just now starting to focus on what's going on as they see one scandal, a Patricia McCraig scandal, which was, this was an advisor to the governor on the CRC Bridge project and his past campaign manager, and it wasn't mentioned until more recently that she was getting paid over $500,000 by the main contractor of the CRC project. So we spend, as taxpayers, $190 million. She gets paid, the cronies get paid, but there's no bridge. And it's that scandal, the one that came out just recently about the First Lady, and Sylvia Hayes, and her accepting contracts while she's lobbying the governor as the First Lady and speaking as the First Lady and an advisor to the governor and getting paid for doing it. That's a violation of Oregon law as well as Oregon ethics. And when the people become aware of one scandal after another, they will finally say, you know what, we're done with Kitzhaber. I mean, there's hush money being paid. They said, we're going to fire a woman named De La Rosa from Cover Oregon. By golly, we're going to get to the bottom of this. They fire her, and she said, you're making me a fall person. I didn't cause this. I'm going to sue you. They said, no, we'll pay you $67,000, no lawsuit, just walk away as long as you promise to not criticize the governor. I mean, that's called hush money.
You're talking about Triz De La Rosa.
Yeah, Triz De La Rosa.
Okay.
And so it's those kinds of one example after another of an aloof and detached governor who thinks he's above the law that are going to cause the voters to say, we're done with him, we're ready for a change, for somebody who will focus on jobs and the economy, on an education system that we can be proud of, and on regaining trust in the office of a governor.
Kitzhaber's ads accuse you of being against gay marriage. Are you?
Absolutely not. I'm not against anything. I'm going to take the oath to be the governor, and I will enforce the laws that we have. That's my promise. I've been married 41 years. I've got 9 kids. I mean, I see the benefit of traditional marriage, but it's not for me to speak on that issue. As governor, it's for me to enforce the law, and I will do that on all the social issues because they're not what I'm running about. I'm running about changing the course of our economy, about restoring education, restoring trust, and not having the cronyism, the hush money, the payoffs that have taken place under the current administration.
Are you morally opposed to gay marriage?
I've got 1 son and 8 daughters. I I stand really with those who've said that the law has an effect or has a concern about traditional marriage because it's been shown to provide the best source of health, education, welfare, and support and prosperity for the rising generation. I mean, I think that those are all very positive things. But what people do in their own lives is their business. The law is clear on that in Oregon, and I will gladly enforce the laws of Oregon because that's the oath that I will take.
Where do you stand on legalizing marijuana?
You know, I personally don't think it's a good idea. It looks like it's going to pass, and I will implement and enforce that law for Oregon. I think we'd be wiser to wait a year and watch what happens in Washington and Colorado. I mean, we're diving in the same deep water that they're diving in without knowing what's beneath the surface. I think we ought to see what successes they have, what problems they have with law enforcement, driving under the influence of organized crime and other things that can be a real part of this mix for Oregon. So I think we'd be wiser to delay it. I also think that it is a gateway drug and it does have consequences, especially on teenagers. Scientific studies are showing the effects of that, and I think that when people really look at it closely, they're going to say, you know, this isn't in the best interest of Oregon. But nevertheless, as governor, my oath is to enforce that law, and if it passes, I will do so.
Kitzhaber's ads say that you are against a woman's right to choose in terms of abortion.
Women have the right to make that choice. I believe that life is very important, and I believe that in Oregon, the right to choose is in place. And as governor, I'm not going to do anything that's going to interfere with that because that decision has already been made. That's my promise. I will enforce the laws and focus on those things I would have some control over, which would be jobs, the economy, expanding our gross domestic product because that creates jobs, and giving our students a world-class education. I mean, we are next to last in graduation rates. We're losing almost a third of our students not graduating with their classmates. That it's not acceptable. It wouldn't be acceptable for my kids or grandkids. Why should that be tolerated for others? And so I'm a firm believer that every problem that Oregon faces is being successfully solved somewhere. And so it's not like taking a blank piece of paper and say, what can we do about education? Let's focus on those school districts in Oregon that are having nearly 100% graduation rates, and school districts around the country, around the world. Learn what works and what doesn't work, and focus on those things that will help us have a world-class education for our students and no longer languish in a race to the bottom.
One of the things I've seen analysts talk about Oregon's economy is that Oregon suffers so badly during downtimes because there is no sales tax. You rely solely on an income tax. When incomes don't go down, the tax goes down. That if you did a hybrid of a lower income tax and a sales tax, you could stabilize Oregon funding. Where do you stand on a sales tax?
I stand with the citizens of the state. It's been spoken on by 9 times by the voters. In fact, it was presented in 1985 by a senator named John Kitzhaber. He was promoting it then, and it got 22% of the vote. He promoted it again in 1993, and it got 25% of the vote. The people have spoken on that very clearly. There's no trust in us changing the tax structure from Salem. We can make recommendations. Ultimately, the people will make that decision. My comment is I am not going to be proposing a sales tax as the governor.
Do you think it'd be better for Oregon, though?
It's hard to say. You know, I've been to all the states around us, met with their financial people, talked to them about their structures. Every state says we have good parts and we have bad parts. They like some of the things that we do in Oregon. What I say is let's look at what's going with those economies that are doing the best. I mean, Utah, Idaho, Texas have vibrant economies. Oregon's is floundering, and our unemployment rate just went up to 7.2%, while the rest of the nation is going down. The national average has gone under 6%. We're going up. We're just bouncing along the bottom because we don't have leadership. We don't have anyone at the head of the government who understands how wealth and economies and jobs are created. And so I believe that I can do that.
2012, CNN says that you supported letting school faculty members carry guns. Do you still support that?
What I said in one of my newsletters was after the most recent, I think there was Sandy Hook shooting then that was such a tragedy, where 22 students were killed and 6 educators. The only person that was armed on the campus was a psychopath intent on doing mass murder. And what I said was, every school district and parents and teachers need to consider what is going to be fair for safety and what's going to be right on their schools. I think it makes sense that you would have 1 or 2 or 3 armed people on campus that maybe they're retired law enforcement or retired military, that get training in how to utilize a firearm, and they're current with that training, so that they could respond with lethal force in the event that there was a mass shooting taking place on their campus. That doesn't mean that they would. Nobody would know except the principal who those people were. I'm not saying that ought to happen. I'm saying that what we're doing presently is not protecting our kids or their teachers, and that we need to be looking at alternatives.
Let's talk about the kicker. I pulled this off your website. We should work together and reform the way Oregon creates a state budget. We can set aside funds during times of economic expansion and avoid the drastic cuts in spending that occur during times of economic recession. What does that mean in terms of a kicker?
Well, first of all, Oregon doesn't have a revenue problem, it has a spending problem. Our all funds budget is larger than many states that are bigger than us. And another truism that we need to realize is that government is an addict. The drug of choice is money, and there's never enough. And so in the discussions in the Capitol and with Governor Kitzhaber, it's always about how do you get more revenue, when what we need to do is ensure that the money that we have is being well spent on top priorities, that we care for the poor and the needy, that we provide a great education for our kids, not that you spend it all in all these different places and only watch the bureaucracy continue to grow. Now, as far as the kicker is concerned, the people have chosen to have a lid placed on spending by saying that if more than 2% of revenue comes in, 2% more than what you expect, then the excess is going to be returned back to the citizens. That's the law, and that's going to stay the law until the people make the choice to go otherwise.
What does this mean? We can set aside funds during times of economic expansion.
We have a spending problem, and so the economic cycle goes up and then it goes down. You have a boom period and then you have a recession. When you're in the boom period, because of the appetite for spending, it's always about spending all of it. And then when you have the inevitable recession, you lay off teachers, you cut school days, you harm people. And what we need to do is to have a rational spending program where the budget only grows in line with inflation and population growth, which is similar to what the private industry has to do as far as its growth of expenditures. And so by doing that, when you have more revenue coming in during your boom period than your spending, the excess goes into the rainy day fund.
But wouldn't that eliminate the kicker?
Not if we make the right change in the law. The kicker is based on above your budget, and so we would budget into the spending amounts of money to go to the rainy day fund. In other words, you plan on it. You save first.
But wouldn't that cut the kicker, though?
It would not cut the kicker, because the kicker is for unexpected revenue above what you budget. I'm saying let's budget in a rational way so that excess money during good times goes into the rainy day fund, so that when you have the recession, you have resources to help ensure your priorities are fully funded.
Gotcha. Okay. Where are you going to spend most of your time in the next 3 weeks?
In Portland. And Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington counties are where the concentrations of voters are. And for me to win this election, there needs to be good turnout, excellent turnout by those that want to see change and integrity restored to our government. They want to have the education system changed. I mean, the Oregon Teachers Union, the OEA, Oregon Teachers Association, or Education Association, is not supporting Governor Kitzhaber. They're done with him. They're not endorsing him. They're giving him no money in the primary or in the general election, because their members see that he's not performing. They have large classes, short school years, and the focus is on Common Core And Common Core is a well-intended federal program that is being foisted on our students, using them as guinea pigs for another federal program that has not been proven. And the teachers see this. They see that one of them said, I'm being relegated to a class monitor. They're even giving some teachers scripts to read to help prepare the student for the test. We need to have an education system where the teachers, the parents, and the local school boards have the greatest influence on how their students are taught. We can do that, but it's not going to happen unless we have this change in a viewpoint, a change in attitude, and I can make that happen.
We're running out of time, so I want to ask, I think, 2 more questions. Sure. I want you to compliment John Kitzhaber on something.
John Kitzhaber has established regional response teams, which are local business and officials, other officials, that look at the assets for their economy on a local level, and they bring recommendations to the legislature on what can be done to help the economies. I think that those local teams are an excellent idea, and those should be expanded on.
All right, now I'd like you to say something critical about yourself. Criticize yourself. Where are you lacking? It's hard, isn't it?
Well, no, it's like, where do you start? I've got 8 daughters, and if they were here, I would have no problem hearing the criticism, because I went through I had 5 adolescent teenage girls at once, you know, and so I have a thick skin and I understand criticism. I would say that I'm optimistic, even when other people are not. I sometimes will drive too hard. George Washington said, don't expect from your subordinates more than they can give. And I have high energy, I work hard, I've had a lot of experience as a lawyer for 30 years and all the various things that I've done, and sometimes I think I push others a little bit.
Are you overbearing?
Pardon me?
Are you overbearing?
No, I don't think so. I get passionate about things. I remember I was reading the Riot Act to one of my daughters when she was 12, and she's this little girl, like she's 4'11", and I'm saying about what she's doing, and she puts her hand on her hip and she says, well, Dad, have a cow. And so at that point it was like, okay, we'll talk later. Mm-hmm. So I think that sometimes I can be overly emphatic, but everybody's got these flaws, and I try and work through it.
Can you convince people in Multnomah County that you're moderate enough to vote for?
Absolutely, and we'll see that on November 4th. For such things as on natural resources. When I'm in Multnomah County, I talk in terms of the whole state, but I'll say, I have, for instance, my wife and I, we drive hybrids, and we have our own garden, and we do our part, we compost, we do things to try and lessen our own carbon footprint. And so when I'm up here, I say, why do we here in Multnomah County we drive electric vehicles or hybrids, we use the MAX, we ride bikes, we compost? Why do we do that? And the answer is because each of us in our own way want to lessen our carbon footprint, do what we can. But without a statewide natural resource platform, one fire in Southern Oregon in just a few days nullifies everything that we're doing up here to try and do our part for the climate. And so we need a statewide natural resource policy that recognizes that this isn't an isolated area. It's not urban versus rural. We're all Oregon. We're all Oregonians. And when we have problems in one part of the state, it affects us up here. And when we have a county like Curry that's about to go insolvent, it affects the money that's available for our schools in Portland. We need a governor who will be the governor of the entire state, who will have the vision, the experience, and will surround himself with the right people to have open, transparent, and accountable government. That's who I'll be.
Representative Dennis Richardson, thank you for your time and good luck to you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.